Welcome to Talking Heads, a project of the Africa Centre based in Cape Town. Each week, we bring you the experts, mavericks, and the thought leaders who are demanding we think differently about who and what it means to be African.
As a woman not overly enthralled with makeup, high heels, long hair, painted nails, and all the things that supposedly need to go with being female, I'm always intrigued when I meet someone on the opposite side of the spectrum. Women intensely engaged with these acts and women who hold these as key to their womanness. A lot has been written, specifically in the area of gender studies, on the performance of gender. That is, seeing gender as a collection of traits and activities, and to conform to these is to be female or male. And not to is to somehow reject these normative notions of what being male or female has to look like. Perhaps because of my own experience of growing up being labeled a tomboy, I am deeply fascinated by this. The suggestion that our behaviors are scripted. Who wrote the script? What does it mean if we follow that script? And what does it mean when we don't? How much do we do out of choice and how much out of a need to conform, to fit in, to be recognized, rather absurdly, for what we already are? The questions loom. Am I only what I'm seen to be? And if no, then why the need to perform my gender, often at a cost to me and at varying degrees of discomfort? Simi Dosekun is a PhD candidate in culture, media, and creative industries at King's College London and a Nigerian feminist. Her work explores new styles of feminine self-presentation and identity among young women in Lagos, Nigeria. She has a master's degree in gender studies from the University of Cape Town and a BA in social studies from Harvard University. She's the author of a children's book, Beam Explores Africa, and co-author of 2 primary school textbooks published by Farafina in Nigeria. I am Yewande Omotso, and today I'm talking with Simi Dosekun about her research entitled New Styles of Femininity in Nigeria. Simi, welcome to the show.
Thanks a lot.
Simi, could you give us a brief description and summary of your current research?
Okay, so my current research is for my PhD, and what I'm doing is looking at how young women in Nigeria, in Lagos specifically, dress with a view to using that to understand something about how they see themselves and who they think they are. Specifically, I'm looking at a style that I'm calling hyperfeminine, which is basically a look at a number of elements that are sort of combined. So, for instance, the long hair extensions or weaves, false eyelashes, false nails, heavy makeup, very high heels, lots of jewelry and accessories, so very sort of glamorous or glammed up look, which I think is very prevalent among young women in Lagos, particularly women of the demographic that I'm looking at, which is what I'm calling elite women, which I've defined very broadly as women who are educated, so who have university education, so either are currently in university or are graduates, and women who are socioeconomically mobile. So women who are young, defined as between 18 and 35.
You're focusing on this very specific group. Why did you choose that?
Because the starting point of my research was living in Lagos and being a young Lagosian woman broadly within that demographic myself, and sort of seeing young women around me, either women I knew directly or just women, in the kinds of social environment that I was in, who were increasingly dressing like that. So I guess I was interested to understand what that sort of style was about. But also I very much recognize that the women I'm researching are by no means representative of young Nigerian women because they're so privileged in many ways. So they're very much a minority, but I also argue that they have disproportionate visibility and cultural relevance, I suppose, because they appear in media relative to other kinds of Nigerian women. So, for instance, they're the Nollywood and music celebrities, the kinds of women that you see in the women's magazines that are published in Nigeria, and so on. So, part of my interest in this demographic is also because I suspect that other people are seeing them and possibly aspiring to be like them in terms of lifestyle in general, but also possibly in terms of their style of dress as well.
What do you make with your research so far of this style of hyperfeminine? And, particularly considering your specialization in feminist studies, what do you think it means in terms of the feminist movement?
So I finished my fieldwork last year in Nigeria. I interviewed 18 women. And from the kinds of things that they were saying in the interviews, there's a sense in which there isn't very much feminist politics, at least not consciously or not articulated in the context of the interviews. Instead, what I heard was very much notions of choice and pleasure.
Your research brings to mind what the feminist Judith Butler referred to as gender performativity, the idea that we perform our gender. Is there a link, do you think, between Butler's theories and your research? If so, what? And could you even just explain a bit deeper the idea of gender performativity?
Okay, yeah. So Judith Butler's theory is actually the theoretical framework that I'm using in my thesis. So conceptually, it's really the basis of my work. And basically what Butler argues is that gender is a cultural fiction and that we do rather than are our gender. So basically gender is something that is, as you said, is performed and is done. And it's the doing of gender that creates the appearance or the effect of gender as having been there all along. So, it's when you act like a woman or dress like a woman, then you appear to be a woman. How I'm using Butler is just to ask the question, what kinds of feminine identities or feminine subjectivities are these particular women performing through this particular style? So Butler is a way for me to link the question of identity with the practice and the performance and, the ritual of sort of getting up every morning and putting on one's face or going to the hairdresser every 2 weeks and, doing this whole sort of extensive beauty ritual in order to then kind of present this particular style or identity.
Do you think there's a connection between the hyper-feminine that you're studying amongst this group of women and the influence of patriarchy, Western hegemony and Western beauty norms?
I think yes, definitely. But I'm definitely wary of kind of having a too quick or too simple analysis that says, black women who wear weaves, for instance, are trying to be white or are rejecting blackness and so on and so forth. I would argue that wearing a weave at this point in time is just another way of performing black femininity because it's become so kind of normalized. Things like long hair, having long hair is very much a sort of Western feminine ideal. So there is a sense in which it's long hair as in long straight hair, hair that flows down your back as opposed to going straight up like an afro might. So yeah, I don't think it's unconnected to Western norms to the extent that they've become global norms. But as I said, I definitely wouldn't sort of say, and I didn't hear in my research that, these women are in some way ashamed of being black or wanting to be white. I think it's more complex than that. And I also think it's about the kinds of norms about beauty and femininity as opposed to race.
In your interviews, as you were talking to them about their style, what were their opinions of their style?
To me, from a feminist perspective, and also I guess from the sort of analytic perspective I'm trying to take, there was a lot of contradiction. So on the one hand, people said choice. It's just my choice. I just like it. It's not because of anything other than my desire to sort of style myself like this. But then in the course of talking, they would then sort of talk about various kinds of direct and indirect pressures that they face to look a certain way. So for instance, things like, when they take out their weaves, because inevitably a weave must come out, then people would sort of comment and say, you didn't dress up today, or don't you want to look fine today, or, just policing, basically. And the other thing that I heard a lot, which I think is very interesting, was this idea of practice. And I think that sort of goes back to the theory of performativity. So there's a sense in which wearing long false nails is not that practical, but you get used to it. So there was a lot of women said you get used to it. Wearing heels, it's painful at first, but you get used to it. You sort of push through the pain and then you get used to it. And even now I can run in heels. Another thing that I heard a lot that I thought was quite interesting was the idea that I know it's not good for me, but I do it anyway. So for instance, the weave, which again I think complicates the notion of choice. So, as we know, if you wear a weave for a very long time, it can actually then start to damage your own hair underneath the weave because of all the friction and the pulling. And likewise, wearing false lashes. If you wear them all the time, when you take them out, some of your own lashes fall out and then sometimes they might not grow back. Likewise, false nails, because I guess the nail underneath can become damaged. So there was this idea of, I know it's not good for me, but I do it. But then when I take out my weave, I let my hair rest for 2 days and I put the new weave in, which, as I said, for me complicates the notion of choice because it's like you're knowingly doing something that could end up having detrimental effects, but you still keep doing it, which then suggests that there's a certain kind of pressure to look a certain way. The other thing I feel is that, if you keep doing it, then you get to a point where you have to keep doing it because, for instance, your hairline might have been destroyed or your eyelashes may be destroyed, so therefore you have to then keep wearing the kind of accoutrement to cover up the damage that you've done.
Anything in particular come to mind in terms of recent accomplishments in the movement?
If young Nigerian women don't think of themselves as feminists or think young, very privileged Nigerian women, what does that mean for the feminist movement in Nigeria if there's a sense in which feminism is being delegitimized before it's even really kind of had any kind of popular sort of effect or consciousness? So I almost feel like there's a certain reversal of progress, actually. The idea that feminism means choice, which you just hear a lot, and so therefore if you have choice then you're fine. I think that's very problematic and also very simplistic, because the fact is that we live in a world where the choices on offer are, we didn't have a say in what the array of choices are. The choices are very limited, so the fact that we might choose between wearing a weave or straightening our hair or whatever, it, for me, doesn't amount to a sufficient politics. I think we need a more radical view than that.
How do you keep from being discouraged?
Yeah, I think it's hard to keep from being discouraged. Also because feminism in general is kind of a lonely position. You tend to be, it's not a mass movement by any means, and I often find myself having to sort of defend my views or, be told that reacting to the notion that my views are illegitimate or are because I've been educated in the West, so therefore I'm importing some kind of false culture into an African context, all of which I completely reject. But it can be exhausting and it can be discouraging. But I suppose if there's a certain commitment to principles, then you just have to kind of keep on.
Your hope for the future?
I hope that black women get to a point where they don't feel they have to wear weaves. So my hope for the future is that the pressure is eased, I suppose, and that the range of possibilities is broadened, particularly in Nigeria. I think it's happening to some extent. But in Nigeria, hopefully we get to a day where having dreadlocks doesn't mean... I used to have dreadlocks. People would say, you don't want to marry, which for me, I still don't understand that connection, but the idea that it's just unattractive, or having natural hair is unattractive, even though that's the way the hair grows out of your head. So I hope we get to a point where there's just more space and more kind of options for women.
Simi, thanks for the work that you do and all the best with your research. Thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you very much.
To find out more about Simi Doseku's work and to listen to other podcasts, visit www.talkingheads.org.za.